Brynn, Sev and I have been digging into the...
Could it be Eva before the surge, but this? Suppose she does.
What have we found?
That I am a very great fool.
He is not a fool.
I am. Hours trying to unravel the complex enchantments in each of these devices, and Sev here, paragon of clarity, points out a single point of commonality so mundane I had ignored it.
It's a team effort every time, Dom. What did you two discover?
What our keen-eyed friend spotted was a singular mark etched into each device.
A maker's sigil. We used them in Tarza to lay claim to a craft work. They're certified to each maker. And I've always heard we borrowed that practice from the Enclave.
Meaning this mark could be registered in public records.
The Spire is a logical next stop. Nothing comforts the rich and powerful like bureaucracy.
That's where I'll start looking, then. Hey, Dom.
So hard, the steps would lead to the spire. Alas. Elected representatives would convene there. And when Weavers had our own governing body.
Heard the Enclave liked to keep extensive records. It's a lawkeeper's dream. Let's see if we can find a registry of Maker's sigils. This looks like some kind of evacuation plan. Doing their research before enacting asylum, I'd wager. tables with assets listed. Looks like a tabulation of supply levels. Coordination for the runners and haulers. They remained in the city for years after the surge, according to these dates. Until they enacted asylum, at any rate. Just some birth records. Surprisingly detailed.
Invaluable. We'll have to make sure Lane adds them to our archive later.
Here we go. Sigils. Ah, found it. Our creator is listed here as Lucia de Crassus. 2 registered workshops, both council approved for dangerous materials. She must have had some pull before the surge. One is here in the city, and the other, let's see. I've been there. That frozen town out in Dredger's Mire. Better wear something warm.
I think it's important we run this one down, Brynn. The water clock is dripping.
A lot of damage this high up. Back in the spire. Let's see if we can find a registry of Maker's sigils. This place was registered to our enchantress of interest, Lucia. It sure doesn't look like a saboteur or smuggler's den. On the workings of Archons by L. de Crassus. Seems promising. Dumb?
Certainly topical. Probably not enough to go on by itself, though. Still significant.
That aerolith can influence the weather. Almost certainly why things are frozen over.
Malfunctioning, then.
Indisputably. The ice buildup must be causing a cyclical localized reaction.
Sure. I'll take care of it.
Good idea. Swampy environs and intense cold is bad even for Enclave parchment. Best to lower the risk.
Already warming up. Hope I didn't damage the priceless artifact too much.
You can't make an omelette, as they say.
A lot of notes here. Water damage from the cold and melt, though. Let's see. Materials. Huh. That's how you visualize a pattern. Lots of marginal notes. These have to be from Lucia. Ah, she mentions a flood in the later passages.
Sev and I will look at these together with her book then. See what we can learn in context. As Aurea says, candle is burning on our flood problem.
Any luck with the materials we gathered from Lucia's workshops?
Yes. I'll let Sev fill you in.
We started with the book, which was painfully dry and highly theoretical.
Unsurprising. The Enclave was notoriously tight-lipped about the construction of the arcs.
The book was still useful, as it contained a number of craft-specific terms, shorthands and annotations, all critical. Referencing the book clarified the notes.
Without it, they bordered on deranged rant, especially at the end.
Sort of a window into her thinking.
We suspect Lucia spent a long time in isolation while working on these.
She covered many topics, but the most prominent was her work into the flood.
Who exactly was Lucia? It seems like she had a lot going on.
Brilliant, but disturbed. She harbored a severe hatred of Enclave leadership, bordering on obsession.
Reams of fiercely colorful text, just to say some very rude things, especially about the Eye, their leader.
She was also, at one point, one of the most respected enchanters in the Enclave. She worked on something she refused to name, but was clearly of deep significance to the Enclave itself. Called it the source of all our problems.
Sadly, she only danced around that subject, and never offered details.
We know the Hearthsiders spent years working in Dynevron after the Surge. Why do we think Lucia ended up so far from the capital?
It's evident she disagreed with the leaders of the Enclave and gathered others around her who agreed. There's talk of several meetings taking place in the Mire, most likely to be away from prying eyes.
Called her group the Verdant Minds. Very planty.
I like it. It's poetic.
Her workshop was a little brisk, even for my tastes. Any idea why?
She was fascinated with Enclave technology, specifically the dismantling, disruption, and repurposing of it.
She was experimenting with aeroliths, the massive enchanted stones that control the Enclave's weather. When the effect is accidentally concentrated, it can be quite intense. We suspect she was experimenting with the aerolith in relation to the floods. She predicted their start.
How do those devices I found with her mark on them tie into all of this?
In her final notes, her obsession shifted from the Enclave's leadership to the miasma flood. She was determined to find a way to stop it. On one hand, she looked to the aeroliths as a mitigation. Could they repel the miasma?
In the end, her answer was no. And so she turned to disruption. We think the arcs were tests. Could she shut them down?
And if so, could she shut down something larger?
She was clearly successful at least once. Maybe twice if we count the one outside the Veil.
Indeed. And when we're doing more general questions, that is what we must talk about.
All intriguing information. But we should focus on the Flood. Does she have an answer for us?
Partially. This is the design.
Her research led her to one conclusion. To stop the floods. She needed to disrupt a barrier of some sort.
This confirms our theory from earlier. She's talking about the barrier established by Asylum.
Her design is detailed and specific. The device it would create inverts the flow of magic and enchanted objects, disrupting them for a time.
We think the devices we found on the Arks were prototypes, small experiments to determine efficacy and duration.
So what's the catch? If the floods are still happening, clearly she didn't build one.
Lucia's thimble, as she calls it, requires some highly specialized components. It has to withstand considerable magical flow, far more than what's produced by an arc.
It's like how mass scales exponentially. Just because you can build a scale model of an aqueduct doesn't mean the real thing can support its own weight.
Thankfully, that supply cache you found has the necessary materials to handle that kind of magical flow.
Solar can pick up where Lucia left off then.
Exactly. The other thing we'll need is a source of magical flame. Solar's mantle won't be enough by itself.
I can handle that part easily. Okay, so we have clear next steps. Just one more thing. What happened to Lucia?
The flood. Our best guess, at any rate. There's no sign of her.
All right. Let's go over everything we know so far.
We know that, for a time after the surge, civilians continued to live in Dynevron until they were forced to evacuate the city. We're still not sure the cause.
Wherever the Hearthsiders went, they're still actively sending scouting groups to scavenge for supplies. From the uniform, the creeper who was watching Brynn sleep belongs to one of these groups.
We also know that a defensive procedure codenamed Asylum sealed access to the Enclave underground. This was done using a barrier almost exactly like the Veil.
Lucia, an ex-High Enchantress, opposed Asylum and began working on ways to sabotage it.
Her research forecasted that the barrier would cause the Enclave to flood with miasma. The very same flood that seems to have killed Lucia before she was able to finish her thimble.
But we have her design. It could disrupt Asylum's barrier.
So Lucia's thimble is the key to our survival.
It's less a key and more like a magical battering ram.
Whatever works.
What is it, Lane?
It's just... I've pored over all the documents we've compiled, and a concrete link between the evacuation plan and the underground is nowhere to be found. I can't shake the feeling we're missing something.
The Enclave destroyed a lot of information from their documents. Could that be why you can't find a link between Asylum and the evacuation?
I considered that. The Enclave may have hidden their location from Lucia.
Being a weaver isn't about being certain all the time. It's about taking calculated risks to carve a path forward. And regardless of the Hearthsider's location, disrupting the barrier is the only option to stop the flood.
You're right. I just hope that if we did miss something, it doesn't come back to bite us.
Even if it does, we will handle it.
That settles it. Brynn, it's time to use the thimble.
Any chance you're familiar with the Grumphalt dance?
My siblings and I had to get to bed on time, or he would come for us.
So it was an effective table.
Good balance of protection and mobility. Thank you for your help with that, Brynn. You've a deft hand for flame magic. You can wear Sev's apprentice hat for one day. Also, Lucia knew what she was doing. This thimble was clearly designed to pair seamlessly with Enclave constructions. Must be her experience as a high enchantress at work. Based on Lucia's notes and what we discovered at the Bastion, this was custom designed to disrupt Asylum's barrier. If it can stop the flood, we need to use it soon. Agreed. We don't know how much time we have left. That console that looks like our scry should be the controls for the barrier. The thimble was built to interface with it. Time to disrupt Asylum. Great timing. I owe you one.
You need to come with me. All of you.
We mustn't cause a panic.
Sure. It's not like we had a dire supplies shortage on our hands before this happened.
What do I tell the High Enchanter? The Guild will want...
Enough! We won't discuss this further. Not in front of our guests. Identify yourselves.
Aurea Harpene, or Silverbeak, as I'm known among Weaver circles. This is my band, and beside me is our acting point.
Brynn. And you are?
Khan Stuneld, Eye of the Enclave. My colleagues are the Spindle and the Axle, representatives of the Enchanting and Crafting Guilds. Who sent you?
Sent us?
Tarza? Renland? Udea? The Enclave is the envy of the Maida for its magical prowess. Clearly one of those nations has finally grown a spine and decided to take it for themselves in our moment of weakness.
Moment?
No one sent us. We came here by accident.
What kind of fool do you take me for? You expect me to believe that you bypassed our veil, infiltrated our loom gates, and breached Asylum without a national power backing you?
When you put it that way.
This is a misunderstanding. We're Weavers, like you. There was a brief opportunity to enter the Enclave for the first time in decades, and we took it. Everything we've done since we arrived has been to uncover what happened here after the Surge. And to find you.
If that is true, have you really no inkling of the trouble you've caused?
No.
Your reckless conduct has unleashed an enemy that nearly destroyed us 27 years ago.
The Surgeborn. They first appeared a little over a decade after the Veil went up.
Where did they come from?
No one knows. But they arrived in the Underworks before making their way to the surface.
Where they left a trail of destruction in their wake and wreaked havoc on the Enclave.
Causing casualties to rise.
And so I called for a retreat here, saving countless lives. We sealed the Surgeborn in the Underworks for good. Until now.
We've been here a little while now. Don't you think all of this could have been avoided if you'd properly said hello?
She's right.
This is hardly our fault.
Look, Surgeborn or not, we had no choice but to remove the barrier. Though, I suppose we owe you thanks for warning us about the floods.
Who warned you?
You did.
Did we? I'll deal with you later.
While we can agree Arakim breached no-contact protocol, it has proven to be the right decision. The floods were growing worse, and now they have stopped. Even if fixing them has introduced a new problem.
One my band would be more than happy to help you solve.
Ha! Work together!
Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned your last name earlier. Any relation to Sharian Harpene?
She was my mother. You know who she is?
Of course! I mean, before my time, obviously. But she's still renowned in the Enchanting Guild. Her work is remarkable. There's a statue of her in Dynevron, you know?
Oh. I can't believe she didn't mention that.
There is so much I'd love to ask you, but for now, Aurea comes from a long bloodline of outstanding and renowned weavers. Shouldn't that buy her band some grace?
All right. Your presence in the outskirts will be tolerated. Nothing more.
What about the Surgeborn?
What about them?
Shouldn't we work together to deal with them?
We could use the help.
The Surgeborn are a problem for anyone in the outskirts, not us. Cassidan's hold is a fortress.
The scouts do head into the outskirts to scavenge for supplies.
We'll take our own precautions. Speaking of, we have pressing matters to attend to.
But...
Enough! My word is final.
Brynn, the one that led us here is clearly the one that warned us. Try to talk to him before we leave. Maybe he's willing to work with us.
Will do. Hey, Arakim, was it?
Oh, just call me Arik.
Well, Arik, I never got a chance to thank you. You know, for grabbing me before I fell to my death.
I think you had it. Besides, I couldn't let you plummet into a chasm. The Eye is pretty peeved with me, but hey, that's just a bonus.
So you're not upset that I breached Asylum, like your colleagues?
I've been pushing to do something about the Surgeborn for years now. Setting them free wasn't great, but sealing them in the underworks indefinitely was never a good solution. Frankly, I think Khan Stanild is just annoyed you undid his one claim to fame. I guarantee he has no plans to do anything about the Surgeborn now that they're free.
You don't think he sees them as a threat?
He's got his head in the sand about a lot of things.
You seem awfully trusting of us, considering the terrible first impression we've made.
I was spying on you the first time we met, so let's call it even.
Sure. Maybe you know everything already then, but have you got any questions for me?
Just one. Why are you here?
Growing up, I saw the Enclave as a symbol of what Weavers lost after the Surge. After all, we have no home to return to, and we're pariahs in most nations. But the longer I'm in here, the more I realize how much your people have lost too, and still stand to lose. I'm here to help, however I can.
That is exactly what I was hoping you'd say. If that's truly what you want, then dealing with the Surgeborn is the first step. Ever since the Veil went up, our people have been in crisis. They've spent so long in it, they're afraid to do what it takes to get out. It doesn't help that some have benefited off that same crisis.
Who?
Who always benefits? The very top. Our leaders are too preoccupied with their own concerns to form a unified front against the Surgeborn.
Such as?
The Spindle is obsessed with getting the Arcs functional again. She believes that will help us regain control. And the Axle is too stressed about our supply shortage right now. But, if their concerns were handled, they could pressure the Eye to finally address the Surgeborn.
That sounds like an opportunity. And are you a representative yourself? Do you have sway?
Representative, yes. Sway? No. I represent the Scouts, meaning I'm at the meetings, but I don't have the title to back me up. The Scouts were once points like you, but our role has changed since the Veil went up. We were effectively drafted into scavenging for food and supplies. It made sense following the Surge, but it's been years. Recently, we've even been separated from Cassidan's hold and the remaining civilians. Anyway, it's the guild leaders who will need to pressure Khan Stanild into dealing with the Surgeborn. That's where my people need your help the most. Then we can start fixing the deeper issues we face.
Sounds like I've got some palms to grease.
Yuck. But yes, I'll come by your camp later. We'll be able to speak more freely there.
What is that about?
The Eye isn't one for idle chit-chat. That's worth watching.
talk to you back at our camp.
You got it.
Sev, you all right?
No. I mean, yes. I'm fine.
You sure?
Brynn, the rest of us are heading out. See you back at camp.
I got to go.